Today marks the very last Demna Balenciaga show ever, Balenciaga Couture, Autumn-Winter 25. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to look back and celebrate his time at the house and go over some of the many controversies as well. This video is sponsored by the social media management tool Metrical. I'll be using their tool throughout the video in a display of the many things that one is able to achieve with their tool, such as social media planning and analysis, both for your own content and, importantly for this video, your competitors. The beginning of Demna's time at Balenciaga came from an almost perfect storm between two brands. Firstly, Balenciaga had been having a bit of a rough time with Alexander Wang, whose designs were fine and were selling well, but during whose tenure they'd been struggling to maintain a consistent brand image. Firstly, they sued Nicolas Ghesquière, who predated Wang as the head of Balenciaga, for hurting their brand image after he spoke out against the exhaustive working conditions that they had him under. Then, when Wang took the position in 2012, he quickly found himself in limbo between continuing Ghesquière's vision for the brand and his own style of minimalism, which already by 2012-2013 was starting to get to look dated, both at Balenciaga and at his namesake, where he would draw criticism for not distinguishing the brand very well. This then led to their third point of struggle when in 2013 Wang redesigned the Balenciaga logo for the first time since 1917, which saw next to no fanfare. People just didn't care. As a result, it led to this narrative that Wang may have been successful at Balenciaga in terms of sales, but there was a lot of discussion about whether it was just good product but lacking in identity. It also didn't necessarily help that he had come after the smash success that was Nicolas Ghesquière, who he was very much in the shadow of. So when in 2015 it was announced that Spring 2016 would be his last collection, people weren't exactly sad about it. To quote Nicole Phelps for Vogue, quote, "Balenciaga would be the first thing Wang touched that didn't turn to gold. Is Kering unhappy with Balenciaga's results despite their upward rise? Does Wang want out to refocus his attention on his growing eponymous label? Is all of this merely tactics to improve the renewal terms for either side? Wang's failure, perceived or actual, could make recruiting someone new at Balenciaga more difficult. What's more, that someone will have to stick, or else the label risks losing some of its own luster." Perhaps it's not surprising then that WWD's report indicated Kering might opt to go with someone internal or lesser known as Wang's replacement. She then goes on in the article to say that given the recent success of Michele's Gucci, who was a newcomer at the time, their best bet may be also a newcomer. And in that, there was really only one option. You see, during this time in 2014, a new fashion house had launched in the Autumn-Winter 14 season named Vetements, who had quickly risen to cult status among the fashionable world for their uniquely pessimistic view on fashion as a whole, something they matched with an extremely high price point and extremely undesigned but familiar pieces, which gave them a very strongly differentiated brand that harkened back to early Martin Margiela. Pure clothing without all the superfluous gimmick. It was new, it was fresh, it was a great way to look at fashion with a uniquely ironic lens, and it gained them favor extremely quickly, becoming one of the most desirable shows to attend within only a single year. Then, after the brand finally announced their creative director had been Demna Gvasalia, it equally shot him to the top of the fashion world as well. He possessed the it factor that Balenciaga had wanted from Wang. The timing was perfect. So when he debuted with Balenciaga Women's ready-to-wear Autumn-Winter 16, the ideas that he was showing at Vetements were still fresh. The label still had some cultural weight from Ghesquière left, and people just ate up this new fashion pessimism with a spoon. Of course, there was discussion beforehand of if Demna could translate the Balenciaga codes in with his anti-fashion perspective, but he very much did and would continue to for the rest of his time at the house, especially with his most repeated code of the cocoon coat, which was originally designed by Balenciaga himself in 1957. Of course, his initial collection wasn't perfect, but it was far superior to how largely the public expected it to be, and for that reason it was a cataclysmic point in Balenciaga's history that took the idea of Vetements to a mass audience. They were extremely familiar garments, puffer coats, windbreakers, jeans, etc., but with extremely high price points. The most famous example being this shopper bag, which went completely viral for its price tag of 975 British pounds, which was about $1,300 in 2016, and at that time, an excessive amount to pay for a designer bag. But it was a smash success. So to have a hit bag in his first collection, something that Balenciaga hadn't really had since the 2001 Guess Gear designed City bag, it was a major coup. Revenue in the fourth quarter of 2016 was up 20.5% from the year previous, with sales up 32.6%, which, considering 2015 they had revenue of $390 million, these were substantial figures. From here, Demna could do no wrong. Season after season, something from the collection would go viral, either right from the catwalk or after a particularly famous celebrity donned the look in what definitely could be considered as showpieces intended for shock marketing. For example, Autumn/Winter 16 ready-to-wear had the laundry bags. Spring/Summer 17 men's had the oversized tailoring, which seems normal now but was very divisive at the time, as well as their IKEA bag dupe, which IKEA even themselves posted about. Spring/Summer 17 ready-to-wear had those spandex shoes that were also trousers, and Autumn/Winter 17 men's had the Bernie Sanders logo, which they later denied was his, as well as the Triple S trainers and the leather shopping bags. Then came several seasons on, which Demna pulled from these initial 4 collections, creating themes for himself like color blocking, using acid green, acid pink, fluorescent yellow, Eve Klein blue, or black, as well as tailoring or using floral lightweight silk for dresses. There was also strong callbacks to the windbreaker jacket. Literally all of the hit bags got replayed, as did many of the shoes. Basically, over the next few seasons, he was securing the foundation that he had laid down in those initial few collections. There were viral moments, even a new hit bag debuted in Autumn/Winter 19 named the Hourglass bag, but many of these successes actually came in later appreciations. This is well visualized by this graph of the popularity of their Instagram, which I was able to attain through the competitors function on Metrical's site, which tracks the incredible popularity of Demna's time at the brand throughout the time between when the data starts in early July 2018 until Autumn/Winter 2020, in which they went up from 6 million followers to just over 11 million followers. This brings me to Autumn/Winter 2020, wherein Demna had really made his impact. He developed his ideas and he'd secured his place as the divisive head of Balenciaga, simultaneously known for his truly unique approach to design, as well as his outlandish prices for things and references to his homeland Georgian street culture like his IKEA bag and the platform Crocs. However, by this point, because it had become so well defined and so viral time and time again, it was due for a slight rewrite. Something one would usually see every 5 years or so in order to keep the brand fresh, which, bearing in mind it had been there for 5 years in the Autumn/Winter 2020 show, it was time. Firstly, he departed from Vetements that September, and his following show, Autumn/Winter 2020, for the first time, would acknowledge a much more negatively serious tone for the brand, which had thus far really only touched on irony and humor when discussing serious topics. Think the Bernie Sanders logo pieces from Autumn/Winter 17, or when he approached dystopia in brightly colored, ironic ways, such as in the Spring/Summer 2020 show, which directly critiqued the wealth disparity and ongoingly unkind attitude towards migrants, both legal and illegal, within the EU. However, unlike these collections, Autumn/Winter 2020 wasn't explicitly political in explanation, but instead allegedly fueled by the incoming fear of the coronavirus, which was said to be a criticism of a wasteful modern way of living. To quote the cut, quote, "Models splashed through the approximate inch of water piped onto the black catwalk, some wearing water socks while others braved the flood in stiletto heels. Balenciaga's creative director Demna Gvasalia reportedly envisioned this as a nod to rising sea levels, one already evident consequence of global warming. Other ominous touches included looming LED screens on the ceiling, which projected images of inferno skies and great squalls of crows. A very doomy overall effect, especially as a backdrop for exaggerated supervillain shoulders. The Cut's Kathy Horan described it as a modern arena that resembled a government assembly, evoked the terrors of a world controlled by soulless bureaucrats. So in that sense, the critical inspiration of the collection wasn't necessarily new for Demna's Balenciaga, but the tone at which the commentary was made certainly was. There was an urgency to his work now, a darkness to his work now, a political or ethical aspect to the way that it was presented. But it was wildly successful. For this reason, it was this dystopian take on ironic fashion that would lead the next period of his time at the brand. No longer was his design language only a criticism of the frivolity and hypocrisy of the fashion culture, as it had been at Vetements. No, now this was specifically his Balenciaga. It's the long-awaited differentiator between the two brands. He would continue this tech-fearing dystopia through Spring-Summer 21, which had an Apple Music collab, and Autumn-Winter 21, which had its own video game called Afterworld: The Age of Tomorrow, which is no longer available to play. Basically, through this time, if Demna was successful at Balenciaga before, this was stratospherically successful. Easily the most discussed designer in fashion for how divisive his designs were, as well as his ability to go viral time and time again. Yes, thanks in part to his close work with Kim Kardashian and Ye West, who routinely went viral in his clothing, getting that all-important EMV for Balenciaga, but also in his ability to translate that into genuinely saleable product, which turned Balenciaga's revenue up to $2.3 billion, almost quintupling it from before he was the head. In fact, he was so successful and so in demand that after a 53-year hiatus, Balenciaga returned to producing couture in July 2021 for their Autumn-Winter 21 season. Importantly, wiping their Instagram beforehand to drum up buzz for the new show, which, according to Metrocore's competitor analysis tool, really did seem to work, as they went up almost a full 1 million followers just in that 1 month alone. The couture show itself was cleverly presented in the traditional couture manner of having the models hold model numbers and walking without soundtrack. It called back to the traditional world of haute couture and seemed to confront the still ongoing criticism that he was far removed from the house codes within his own design language. Of course, it didn't totally stop that criticism, nothing would, but instead of shying away from this, they decided to confront this head on. Something they would also do in their ready-to-wear with a new hire. That September, Ludwig Poix was hired as their new CMO, coming from Moncler, before that Philippe Plein, to take Balenciaga deeper into this dystopian era. Now, there were 2 collections that were particularly famous after she joined, namely there was the Simpsons collection that debuted merely weeks after she joined, as well as the Gucci Hacker collection that was really Gucci's collection, not Balenciaga's. So I actually think the first collection that she specifically worked on would have been the Autumn-Winter 22 ready-to-wear show. This is important because this was a major show for Balenciaga, a perfect mix of their shock and ethical marketing, which showed off a commentary on the war between Russia and Ukraine, specifically on the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and how that reminded Demna of living through the Georgian War, where he had needed to flee to survive. It was a very heartfelt and raw collection that felt both honest and poignantly targeted in his political message. It saw massive amounts of outpouring of positivity on social media and was probably the pinnacle of his success at the Balenciaga brand, especially because of the social media response, given that they were the first luxury brand to comment on the war between Russia and Ukraine. In turn, this really made it the height of Balenciaga fever. Resort 2023 was all over our feeds. Autumn-Winter 22 couture went viral for Kim Kardashian and Nicole Kidman walking, as well as the meme of Naomi Campbell getting stuck in the doorway. Spring 23 equally was viral for Ye West opening the show, as well as generally the dystopian messaging within. Really, it felt like nothing in this year could keep Balenciaga out of our mouths, and seldom was a bad word spoken about them. At least that was until the scandal. I put together a bare bones timeline of the scandal itself, so I'm just going to go through with you now what actually happened chronologically. So October 6th, 2022, Balenciaga once again wipes its Instagram, as they were known to do for many of their campaigns, but this time it was in support of women's rights in Iran. The caption read, quote, "We stand with all Iranian women in memory of Mahsa, who was a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian lady who'd recently died under the custody of Iran's morality police." So this was them continuing their ethical marketing, which according to Metrical's data doesn't affect a change in Instagram followers that is sustained until November 14th. Again, to go along with their ethical marketing, Balenciaga deletes their Twitter account, which is speculated to be because of Elon Musk and the controversies surrounding him. November 15th, Balenciaga Objects was announced. November 16th, they released this set of images for their gift collection holiday campaign shot by Gabriele Galimberti, who was known for his toy series of similar images, but now featured the BDSM bear bags from the Spring-Summer 23 collection being held by children. It did cause some backlash, but a manageable amount considering it was supposed to be shock marketing anyway. November 21st, Balenciaga released this campaign for their garderobe collection shot by Joshua Bright, who was known more for photojournalism. Perhaps on November 21st as well, some sources say it's on November 20th, which I don't think can be true because the campaign supposedly came out on November 21st. Anyway, a TikTok user called Brittany Venti, who I think has now rebranded to an account called Shampoo, made a video about the original Balenciaga Objects campaign, I think saying how she thought it was inappropriate for children to be around alcohol and the BDSM bear bags. It is worth noting that her content does focus on more inflammatory concepts or theories, so commentating on something that could be controversial like this is well within her wheelhouse. She then tweeted about the TikTok saying, quote, "They also had a document on their page about the court case allowing for virtual CP to be legal. Makes you wonder." This is now a deleted tweet. Most of the tweets on this account are deleted now, but she has rebranded to Brittany X Venti, where she is equally as inflammatory. However, it is worth pointing out at this point that the court document that she was referring to was an excerpt from the 2008 US Supreme Court decision in United States versus Williams, which upheld part of a federal CP law to say it's illegal to ask or offer for CP, even if that material didn't exist, which means that the man named Williams lost his case and that it is still punishable by law to offer or ask for illegal content, even if it doesn't exist. It's a case against CP, not for CP, which I feel like is an important distinguisher for how the discussion would continue online, as clearly most people did not seem to realize that. But also, would it matter if it was for or against? I'm not sure, because frankly it is strange for that to be there in the first place. It is, though, an important distinguisher to note just because of the way that it was presented both in the original TikTok and on Twitter, as well as with the next person who shared it on the same day. So later on that same day, November 21st, a YouTuber who goes by Shoe on Head then made her own tweet about the topic, linking the aforementioned gift collection photo shoot with the garderobe campaign together, despite them being totally separate projects. And it was this tweet that really exploded the awareness of the campaigns and the document within it, causing outcry for these strange CP undertones that were shared between the images. This led to about a 3-day period where this story went massively viral. There is absolutely no way you didn't hear about this within this time. It hit national news, was all over our social media, and people were calling up Balenciaga for promoting CP and demanding that Demna gets fired. People started destroying their Balenciaga bags or trashing them. Multiple celebrities jumped on the trend, and countless people expanded that more nefarious things were going on at Balenciaga, many of which without any evidence whatsoever. Weirdly though, as you can see here from Metrical's competitor analysis statistics, you can see not only did it not negatively affect the brand in the short term, but actually after a big dip on the 19th following the campaign launch and a slight dip on November 22nd following the Shoe on Head video, they ended November with more followers than they went into the month with. By a lot. There were also at this point connections drawn between the wiping of their social media, which some assumed meant that they were admitting guilt. However, as aforementioned, it had nothing at all to do with that, and instead was part of an ongoing tactic of wiping their social medias at the start of each new campaign, something they had actually started for their couture all the way back in July, but I believe, though I definitely could be wrong, whose most recent wipe was for the Iranian women post. Their deletion of Twitter before the campaign also, and it's later discussed that they also scrubbed their Facebook, but I couldn't find a most recent date to when that happened. Then comes November 23rd, Gabriele Calimberti, the photographer of the gift shop campaign, issued a statement clarifying that he had no control over the selection of products or models in the original campaign, including the BDSM bears, and that he was not involved in the guard-robe campaign whatsoever, which did matter still by this point, as people mostly were conflating the two campaigns together, thinking that they were one. The following day, on November 24th, Balenciaga apologized for both campaigns, stating that the teddy bear bags should not have been featured with children and that the inclusion of unsettling documents was unapproved by their team, passing the blame onto the production company North 6 and the set designer Nicolas Desjardins, but it didn't really do anything to slow down the backlash whatsoever, and the brand removed the campaigns from all platforms nonetheless. November 25th, Balenciaga sued North 6 for $25 million for the, quote, inexplicable acts and omissions in the guard-robe campaigns. November 27th, Kim Kardashian jumped on publicly to say she was re-evaluating her relationship with the brand, while Ye did continue to stand by them. November 28th, Balenciaga issued another statement taking full responsibility and announced internal and external investigations. I don't believe they ever announced what came of those investigations, if I'm honest, but no one was fired, despite explicit public demand for it, though honestly I don't think they actually could have fired Demna, the CEO Cedric Charbit, nor the CMO Ludwig Pan, just because they would have had nothing to do, or very little to do, with overseeing the tiny details in those campaigns, despite the fact that they would have signed off on them, if you know what I mean. December 2nd then came, and Demna publicly, personally apologized on his Instagram, but that also has now been deleted. And December 4th, the lawsuit was dropped and Balenciaga partnered with child protection organizations and implemented stricter content validation processes. From here, the backlash really didn't cool down. I'm imagining I will get some comments under this video about it. I certainly did under my original Balenciaga video that was posted just before this all went down. But still to this day, it's a major reason why people do not engage with the Balenciaga brand. But effectively, from the brand's perspective, all they could do was wait. They could hope that the scandal would subside eventually. Months passed, and it really didn't calm down. The press may have negatively affected sales, but it also massively improved visibility and even support through the acquisition of followers on Instagram, shown here with Metrical, of course. The Autumn-Winter 23 show came and went with confused discourse, firstly on whether they would have a show at all, and then after it did show, whether the focus was actually back on the clothes in the way that they promised, or if this was the same Balenciaga as ever before, just with a change in marketing to say it was about the clothes in order to negate some of the negative publicity that they were seeing. In that sense, the scandal really didn't go away, and it hasn't to this day. It was a major moment in luxury fashion where a truly major house was nearly successfully cancelled because of public opinion. I'd argue to say that it was the largest luxury fashion scandal since the John Galliano anti-Semitic rant in 2011. It's unfortunate really, because Demna was a man who really changed the way that the public dressed. He legitimized ironic fashion as the style du jour and was really the first luxury house to discuss politics in this way since perhaps Vivienne Westwood, though her activism was largely conducted in her personal life. A few shows passed in this new tentative era of Balenciaga, where the brand would now try, or continue I suppose, to use celebrity in the hopes of returning to favor. Notable inclusions include Kathy Horan, Diane Bernay, and Amanda Lepore, with even more celebrities in the audience for Spring-Summer 24. Then in Autumn-Winter 24, they famously had Cardi B walk and Nicole Kidman. Interestingly though, it wasn't until Autumn-Winter 24 Couture that the focus would actually return to be on the quality of Balenciaga, in a more notably positive way when the butterfly masks and the couture t-shirts went viral for the incredible amount of work that went into it. Strangely though, there really isn't much else to say about these last few years of Demna's time at the brand. Unlike Jonathan Anderson at Loewe, he wasn't leaving at a particularly high. Instead, Demna is kind of leaving with the scandal still in noticeable distance, close enough that it remained a very large talking point when his departure was announced and caused Kering, who's Balenciaga's parent company, shares to dip 12% when he was announced to take over another of their major brands, Gucci. Now, this isn't the video to discuss what I think will happen with Demna's Gucci, but in terms of Demna's Balenciaga, it certainly was a wild ride. He went from risky newcomer to the most desirable luxury brand on the market, almost quintupling revenue when it hit $2.3 billion, only then to lose it all off of the back of a major scandal. But now, following a 2-week retrospective of Demna's influence at Balenciaga held at the 4 Rue de Sèvres, which featured many of his best hits that we've gone over in this video already, as well as his rejection letter for an internship dated 17th of May 2007 that made rounds on social media, as it was well before his time at Balenciaga, showing the struggle that he had to get there, as it even predated his own brand Vêtements that brought him to their attention. This was then joined by Demna Gvasalalia's posting of 16 of Demna Balenciaga's fashion show set designs, reinforcing that sense of retrospective that the exhibition had begun. This was the spirit in which we, the audience, were introduced to his farewell show, the 54th Couture Collection, Autumn-Winter 2025. In attendance were some of Balenciaga's regulars over the years. They had Nicole Kidman, who walked Autumn-Winter 22 Couture, both Alexis Stone and Lisa Rinna, who famously attended a lot of their shows, Cardi B, who walked for Autumn-Winter 24 Ready to Wear, and Kyle MacLachlan, who starred in the Spring-Summer 25 campaign, all of whom tie us back to that idea of retrospective. The show itself, too, continued this with a soundtrack of names associated with Demna's Balenciaga, which included the voice of Kim Kardashian, who also walked in the show along with Naomi Campbell, another Demna favorite. However, most of all, I think it's extremely poignant that the model who opened for Demna's first Balenciaga show, Autumn-Winter 16, Eliza Douglas, now closed his final show. In terms of design, a swathe of color-blocked looks began the show, which was one of the aforementioned themes. 2 followed polka dots, a theme I now realize I failed to include earlier, florals, leather, oversized clothing, fluorescent yellows, and even gimmicks in the new Balenciaga Couture suit bag. I can't tell you how to feel in terms of taste. That's really for you to decide whether you enjoyed the collection or not. But in terms of provenance, I certainly think it's interesting that this returns to his first couture show for the house, in which he pared everything back in order to focus on the clothes. Yes, of course, it still had gimmicks and it still had many of the themes that he has built over this time. But by and large, this was one of his most simple shows, and I think that will be divisive in the aftermath of this collection, especially for people who anticipated he would go out with a bang. In that sense, I wonder if in time, the controversy will still be the mark that scars his time at Balenciaga, or if with time he will be remembered for his critical tone and his activist-led world building that took him to the height of fashion in the first place. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe for more content like this. If you're interested in videos like this, but about beauty brands, please do check out my beauty channel here, and a special thank you goes out to my patrons over on Patreon, some of whose names are on the screen now. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.